And I looked back and I saw the building explode, the whole top of the building explode in that big ball of fire. And that was it. I knew it was, that was it.
And I remember all the skin was rolling off my hands. It wasn't blistering, it was just kind of all just rolling off. My jacket was melting and smoking. And
they put us down on the ground. They put straps behind our back and asked, where are the kids? Where are the women and children? One of the FBI guys said, you gotta live with this for the rest of your life.
We just watched the whole thing, still hoping people would come out. That eventually, we think they just cooked in there. The fire was all around them, and they melted. Bottles melted, babies' bodies just melted together. The heat was so horrible.
The surrender plan evolved over 4 days that I was inside the compound. Koresh and I would come out together, go through a metal detector, and he would surrender to a Texas Ranger.
David told him on the phone, he says, God said the waiting time's over. If you will allow me to write out my interpretation of the 7 seals from the book of Revelation, then we'll all come out together.
The on-scene commander agreed. We convinced him that this was worth the effort if we could get tangible proof that David was making progress.
Are you telling me here and now that as soon as you reduce the 7 seals to a written form, that you're coming out of there?
Yes, yes, yes. I never intended to die in here.
So it's agreed. People inside are all told about it. We're all breathing a big sigh of relief, feeling great. We know we're going to jail by this time.
Even though the negotiation efforts had not gotten anyone out since about the 22nd of March, we never gave up negotiations. Judy Schneider is on the phone, and they asked her how much progress she's making on typing this up. She said, listen, at this rate, it could take me a year. The decision was made at that juncture by the on-scene commander that we were gonna be prepared to deliver the morning of the 19th of April tear gas into that building.
I don't think the negotiations failed. I think the negotiations would have worked. I think what happened on April the 19th, the conflagration, happened because there were those in the FBI that felt like they were being made fools of and that they had to make something happen. They had to take control.
Tear gas is at the lowest end of potential violence, of a tactical resolution. As negotiators, we had all considered this, and we had accepted and endorsed the concept of the introduction of tear gas to immediately saturate the entire compound as rapidly as we could, force them into the center, exit the front door, just as they had agreed to do back on the 2nd of March.
Using tanks and tear gas against a building that had, at the very least, innocent children. How could that ever be justified?
It looks like smoke is coming out from several windows now. You can still see the flames.
I turned around and started seeing those first whiffs of smoke coming out. I wasn't surprised. I figured, okay, they're gonna burn down the crime scene, they're gonna exit, and then it would just be ATF's word against the Branch Davidian's word in court. But I figured they'd do their business and then they would all come out en masse. But that simply did not happen.
Still no sign of anybody coming out. What triggered this off, we have no way of knowing.
How did the fire start?
Can't answer that honestly. I did not observe the fire where it started.
I just assumed that frame building getting bumped by those tanks and they're punching holes into that, the whole thing has to be shaking. I know they had oil lanterns on bales of hay, and I'm just thinking that's gonna knock over the lanterns.
I do know, and I know this in my heart, that the FBI did not start the fire, did not intend to start the fire.
9 people came out. 7 of the 9 had accelerants, had gasoline or diesel fuel or whatever on their clothing, on their pant legs and on their sleeves.
A microphone inside records a voice asking, "Got any fuel? Have you poured it yet?" Another answers, "In the hallway. Don't pour it all out. We might need some later."
They wouldn't have said light the fire if somebody hadn't run a tank in there. And there was some guy from the government driving the tank. So they're responsible for it no matter what. What do they expect them to do?
I don't think it started on purpose. I don't think that the FBI started it. I think it was an accident, but I think it's a kind of accident that could have been foreseen. The FBI would not let the fire trucks in past the gate, ostensibly because they said they may shoot at you. So the place was allowed to burn to the ground.
Good afternoon, everyone. It appears that there has been a tragic, certainly a fiery ending to that 51-day standoff between federal authorities and members of the Branch Davidian cult near Waco, Texas. The smoldering ruins of that compound that we believe housed 95 people altogether, including 17 children.
Why did the FBI take provocative action on day 51?
To say, well, if the FBI would have done nothing, these people would still be alive. That's probably true. For how much longer?
Jamar bristles when anyone suggests the Branch Davidians died because of that.
David Koresh controlled those people's lives, absolutely. Absolutely. He's the one responsible for their deaths.
In San Antonio today, the nightmare final hours of the Branch Davidian standoff came back to life as the prosecution rested its case against 11 cult members accused of killing 4 federal agents last February.
If the government wants to use me as a material witness, they can go right ahead, but they're not going to like my testimony. I'll tell them, you know, there is another side to this.
Everyone was acquitted, found not guilty of murder or conspiracy to murder. But several were also found guilty of gun violations. The jury in San Antonio saw that the original raid by the ATF was excessive force and that the Davidians had a right to self-defense.
And I'm sorry that there are 4 agents that are dead, but we lost 85 of them. Our friends and family too.
The political firestorm about what went wrong on the ground in Waco. What's to be done about the Justice Department and the FBI?
We did everything we could to avoid the loss of life. They made the decision to immolate themselves.
These are the hardest decisions in the world to make. My heart goes out to the families of the agents killed and those injured, as well as to those children and the families of those who perished in the compound today.
The final decision for this tank and tear gas plan was up to Janet Reno. I think she had the wool pulled over her eyes by some far more savvy Washington players in the leadership of the FBI. But she was the Attorney General. They knew the buttons to push with her by saying that the kids were being abused.
I have no reason whatsoever at this point to believe that the FBI was responsible for the deaths of the people. But I think it is important for the American people to know that we have pursued every question and pursued it as far as we humanly can to get to the truth.
Ruby Ridge and Waco are rallying cries, even today, for militia groups because they still view them as government overreach. They still see them as actions where the government exceeded their authority and attacked.
So I think one lesson to learn is that when law enforcement agents
take extreme action, at least some citizens may have an extreme reaction back.
Waco and Oklahoma City bombing are completely connected. Tim McVeigh was in Waco while the siege was going on, and he was selling bumper stickers, basically promoting the fact that, we need to have a militia movement, the government's out of control and everything else. And when the Davidian compound burned down, it lit a fuse inside of him that was not going to be extinguished. He was so angry, he wanted revenge.
Timothy McVeigh, guilty. His conviction comes a little more than 2 years after a massive bomb shattered the Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people, including 19 children. It was the worst terrorist act in American history.
What do you see as the legacy of Waco?
I hope that the legacy is that the agencies, with the power to use their military equipment, only use it when it's absolutely necessary.
The consequences of Waco for ATF were significant. The director of ATF was removed, the number 2 and number 3 were removed, and ATF still teaches today lessons learned from Waco, and it's a brutal presentation that talks about the consequence of not speaking up and stopping something.
After this incident, the FBI, there were several investigations, congressional hearings, and the FBI did make changes. Following Waco, the on-scene commander and the tactical commander's careers were effectively over. The various inquiries and internal FBI reviews validated the approach that the negotiation team took. When we had the Freeman 85-day siege, the first thing we did was to arrest the 2 leaders by luring them away from the others. It worked perfectly, and we didn't have the kinds of problems we'd seen at Waco or Ruby Ridge. I think Waco has to be looked at as an American tragedy, a great tragedy. People tend to look at complex issues as being black or white, good or bad. If they were bad, that means we in the FBI were good. If we were bad in the FBI, that means they were all good. Look at this as a very complex situation where both good and bad decisions were made on both sides. That led to a very tragic conclusion. I think it's the only correct way to look at this.
That's the hardest thing, is just that all these beautiful kids died. Not just the kids, it's the beautiful people, I mean, all the people that I was close to, that didn't make it. They could have had lives still.
Hey, it's John Leguizamo. Click below to subscribe to the Paramount Network channel on YouTube for more on Waco.